Hi friends, do you remember where we left off with Charlotte's Web? The next chapter we're going to read is chapter 3, called Escape. The barn was very large. It was very old. It smelled of hay and it smelled of manure. There's that funny word again. It smelled of the perspiration of tired horses and the sweet, wonderful breath of patient cows. Speaking of cows, do you notice the cows behind me? That's a painting of some of my very favorite cows, all different breeds, all different types. I grew up on a dairy farm where there were lots of cows, and that's just some of my friends behind me. So think about where Wilbur lived in the barn. It smelled of the sweet breath of patient cows. It often had a sort of peaceful smell, as though nothing bad could happen ever again in the world. It smelled of grain and of harness dressing and of axle grease and of rubber boots and of new rope. And whenever the cat was given a fish head to eat, the barn would smell of fish. But mostly it smelled of hay, for there was always hay in the great loft up overhead, and there was always hay being pitched down to the cows and the horses and the sheep. The barn was pleasantly warm in the winter when the animals spent most of their time inside, and it was pleasantly cool in the summer when the big doors stood wide open to the breeze. The barns had stalls on the main floor for the workhorses, tie-ups on the main floor for the cows, a sheepfold down below for the sheep, a pig pen down below for Wilbur, and it was full of all sorts of things you would find in barns. Ladders, grindstones, pitchforks, monkey wrenches, scythes, lawnmowers, snow shovels, axe handles, milk pails, water buckets, empty grain sacks, and rusty rat traps. It was the kind of barn that swallows like to build their nests in. Swallows are a kind of bird. Can you picture this barn? It was the kind of barn that children like to play in. And the whole thing was owned by Fern's uncle, Dr. Mr. Homer L. Zuckerman. Wilbur's new home was in the lower part of the barn, directly under the cows. Mr. Zuckerman knew that a manure pile is a good place to keep a young pig. Pigs need warmth, and it was warm and comfortable down there in the barn cellar on the south side. So it looks like Wilbur was quite comfortable there in the barn cellar, nice and cozy and warm. Fern came almost every day to visit him. She found an old milking stool that had been discarded, and she placed the stool in the sheepfold next to Wilbur's pen. Here she sat quietly during the long afternoons, thinking and listening and watching Wilbur. Look at her. Here she is, very patient and watching Wilbur, sitting on that milk stool. Oh my goodness. A milk stool is one that a farmer might sit on when they milk the cows. When I grew up on the farm we actually had milking machines. So my dad didn't sit on a stool, but he put the milking machine on the cow. The sheep soon got to know her and to trust her. I think Fern was kind of a trustworthy girl. So did the geese who lived with the sheep, and all the animals trusted Fern. She was so quiet and friendly. Mr. Zuckerman did not allow her to take Wilbur out, and he did not allow her to get into the pig pen. So she just sat there patiently there and watching Wilbur. See if you can picture this barn cellar in your mind. But he did tell Fern that she could sit on the stool and watch Wilbur as long as she wanted to. It made her happy just to be near her pig, and it made Wilbur happy to know she was sitting right there outside of his pen. But he never had any fun. No walks, no rides, no swims anymore. One afternoon in June, when Wilbur was almost 2 months old, he wandered out into his small yard outside the barn. Fern had not arrived for her usual visit. Wilbur stood in the sun feeling lonely and bored. "There's never anything to do around here," he said. He walked slowly to his food trough and sniffed to see if anything had been overlooked at lunch. He found a small strip of potato skin and ate it. His back itched, so he leaned against the fence and rubbed against the boards. When he got tired of this, he walked indoors, climbed to the top of his manure pile, and sat down. He didn't feel like going to sleep. He didn't feel like digging. He was tired of standing still, tired of lying down. "I'm less than 2 months old and I'm tired of living," he said. He walked out to the yard again. "When I'm out here," he said, "there's no place to go but in. When I'm indoors, there's no place to go but out." "That's where you're wrong, my friend," said a voice. Wilbur looked through the fence and saw the goose standing there. "You don't have to stay in that dirty little yard," said the goose, who talked rather fast. "One of the boards is loose. Push on it, push on it, push on it, and come on out." The goose is telling Wilbur, "Come on out." "What?" said Wilbur. "Say it slower, please." At the risk of repeating myself," said the goose, "I suggest that you come on out. It's a beautiful day out here." "Did you say a board was loose?" That I did," said the goose. Wilbur walked up to the fence and saw the goose was right. One board was loose. He put his head down, shut his eyes, and pushed. The board gave way. In a minute, he squeezed his little self through the fence and was standing in the long grass outside the yard. The goose chuckled. "How does it feel to be free?" she asked. "I like it," said Wilbur. "That is, I guess I like it." Actually, Wilbur felt kind of funny to be outside his fence with nothing between him and the whole big world. "Where do you think I'd better go?" he said. Anywhere you like," said the goose. "Go down to the orchard, root up the sod. Go down through the garden, dig up the radishes. Root up everything, eat grass, look for corn, look for oats. Run on over, skip and dance, jump and prance. Go down through the orchard and stroll in the woods. The world is a wonderful place when you're young." "I can see that," replied Wilbur. He gave a jump in the air, twirled, ran a few steps, stopped, looked all around, sniffed the smells of the afternoon, and then set off walking down through the orchard. Pausing in the shade of an apple tree, he put his strong snout, that's the part right here, his snout, his nose. He put his strong snout into the ground and began pushing, digging, rooting. He felt very happy. He had plowed up quite a piece of ground before anyone noticed him. Mrs. Zuckerman was the first to see him. She saw him from the kitchen window and she immediately shouted for the men. "Homer," she cried, "pigs out! Lurvy, pigs out! Homer, Lurvy, pigs out! He's down there under that apple tree." "Now the trouble starts," thought Wilbur. "Now I'll catch it." The goose heard the racket and she too started hollering. "Run, run, 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 downhill, make for the woods," she shouted to Wilbur. "They'll never, ever, ever catch you in the woods." The Cocker Spaniel, the dog, heard the commotion and he ran out from the barn to join the chase. Mr. Zuckerman heard and he came out of the machine shed where he was mending a tool. Lurvy, the hired man, heard the nose and came up from the asparagus patch where he was pulling weeds. Everybody walked toward Wilbur, and Wilbur didn't know what to do. The woods seemed a long way off, and anyway, he'd never been down there in the woods and wasn't sure he wanted to be all by himself. "Get around behind him, Lurvy," said Mr. Zuckerman, "and drive him toward the barn. And take it easy, don't rush him. I'll go and get a bucket of slops." The news of Wilbur's escape spread rapidly among the animals on the farm. Whenever any creature broke loose, the animals were very interested, and the event was of great interest to the others. The goose shouted to the nearest cow that Wilbur was free, and soon all the cows knew. And then one of the cows told one of the sheep, and soon all the sheep knew. Then the lambs learned about it from their mothers. The horses and the stalls in the barn picked up their ears, and they heard the goose hollering. And soon the horses had caught on to what was happening. "Wilbur's out," they said. Every animal stirred and lifted its head and became excited to know that one of his friends had gotten free and was no longer penned up